Good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode 907. Monday, the 5th of June. It's the pre-show, the magical, marvelous time where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time, we say really outrageous things. So we'll get this pre-show cranked up. If you're looking for the actual show content, move the slider over about 10 minutes, and that will mark the beginning of the shoe. And we're going live to Guam. Guam.
Good morning. How are you doing?
You guys survived? You okay?
Oh, we survived, and so we're setting up over at the at Troy's favorite Hilton, and
Yeah.
So I hope you can hear us okay. We're using wireless mics. Is it coming through okay, or do you hear too much?
Yeah. Sounds good. Sounds great.
Excellent. All right.
No, the video looks good. The audio sounds good. So we're good to go. Thanks for the time. What time is it locally there?
It is almost 10 o'clock. What is today? Tuesday morning.
Yeah, June the 6th.
My tracking of day of the week is just so out the window right now.
I can totally understand that. What's so sad, I'm like that all the time, even with no, with no weather issues. It's just, I never know what day it is. I never know what time it is. When you work bizarre hours, you just
Isn't that the truth?
don't know. Troy's on here now. I bet you Troy, well, he just hung up on us.
Yeah,
he
Troy
probably
wow.
he saw the three of us and he just immediately hung up on us and he got out of here. So here he comes. All right, I think this should work. Yeah, we're getting, just so everybody will know, again, y'all are pros at this. We're live on YouTube now. We'll be live on local television at the top of the hour in 6 minutes, but most people listen to the produced show that comes out later in about 6 hours. There's Troy.
My boys.
Troy, Good how are you?
Yeah.
How you doing?
What's going on, buddy?
Nothing much. We're just trying to deal with so many things all at the same time, and inside and outside the office, but business as usual.
So where are you sitting? Because you're sitting by the Hilton.
Yes, I've got a friend who has put himself up at the Hilton for a week because his house has no power or water.
Okay.
He's up in northern Guam. So
those are the chairs that were on the deck. So I assume the place is in pretty good shape.
It's fairly good shape, though the trees are completely obliterated.
Yeah.
They're still standing, but it's a world of different from what it normally is.
I just looking across the way at Lover's Jump,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you
Wow,
still hear
guys.
Landon?
Not right now. I don't.
Okay. I see her reading on your mic. But
Yeah, we're hearing you fine.
okay.
Good to see you, man.
Likewise, it's been a while. I guess since AMS, huh?
Yeah, since AMS in Denver, we saw each other there, and then a year ago, this last week in Guam, when we show 854, I think, or something like that.
How in the world has time gone so fast?
I don't know. And then a super typhoon thrown in. Hey, Kim. Hey, Jen.
Hi.
Y'all meet you meet my boys in Guam here. You meet Brandon and Landon.
Hi, guys. Good to see
morning.
you.
How are
Good
you?
morning.
Yeah.
Rise and shine.
Well, it's 10 o'clock. It's mid-morning over there.
That's right.
My coffee's already wearing thin. Good grief.
Went out. We had thunderstorms here this afternoon. I hung out with airport operations most of the afternoon here, and thunderstorms and heavy rain and all kinds of stuff, and brought in British Airways, Lufthansa, KLM and Virgin Atlantic, got them in their parking places, and I left. I said, okay.
Let's see, I'm going to fish that too just a little bit.
So
I
what do
could
we
just
have
sit here and
here?
watch. I could just sit here and watch that live shot, and just it's like a Valium sandwich. I'm just relaxed looking at this.
I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
what is that behind you?
That is Tumon Bay. So that is on the western side of Guam. That's Two Lovers Point right there. That's like one of the famous tourist spots to overlook into the water.
Oh, yeah, that looks like a beautiful cliffside.
Yeah, yesterday I went for a jog throughout Tumon. First time I've been running in quite a while, and the beach is so different. Where we had the water just rushed up so high up on shore. There's not much shade left on the beach right now. All the trees were either completely defoliated or ripped apart, uprooted, and so there is a world of difference.
Hey, Landon, do me a favor when you walk out there in a little bit, go downstairs and see Andre. He's at the main desk, and just tell him I said hello, because I mean we were up there a year ago, and
yes,
and I checked with him about a week ago to make sure he was okay, and he said he was, but there was a lot of stuff they had to do at the hotel. So.
Oh yeah, yep. It's been busy. They're cutting down a lot of the big trees. So the front parking lot, there's a couple of large trees still standing. I think with the westerly winds, some of the hills with the zip line protected some of the trees, but there's a lot of them that were either brought down or they were nothing. None of the foliation survived. So it's going to be a while till it turns green again.
Both of y'all, and then I'll let you go turn it, James, so we can go into the show. But both of y'all have power, water at your houses now? No?
Nothing at home.
Good grief.
2 weeks.
That's
Wow.
2 weeks. Yeah.
13 days now,
Wow.
no water, no power. And I just got phone signal 2 days ago.
Yep.
Wow. So is Bill Murray on the planet? Is he coming in tonight, or is
He sent a note. He bowed out here a few minutes ago. Just had a long day.
Oh, is he in the United States? Do we know where he is? I mean, he hadn't been here in like a month.
We don't think he's at the Guam Hilton. So I mean,
No.
Yeah, he's back.
Apparently he's back, but he has responsibilities that he really has to attend to at some point.
Oh, brother. Like 50-cent beer night at Hooters. We all know what's going on here. Yeah.
Exactly.
So we'll let Troy kind of lead the discussion here, and we're going to hit the TV in 3 seconds. So
James, okay.
Welcome to those watching on the television side. It's Monday night. We're back on our regular Monday night schedule for WeatherBrains. So let's get this party started here. We will record track 1 and we will record track 2. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Can you guys hear that? I don't think you guys can you? Let's see.
Would run. Birmingham TV viewers want to change. They're tired of.
Did y'all hear that?
Yes, we heard that.
Okay. All right. Again, what you hear is not what goes to the audio, podcast, but you need to hear just some basics of it. All right, here we go. I'm sorry. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains, episode number 907. This is the weekly show all about weather. Let's see, Monday, June the 5th. We are now into meteorological summertime. How about that? So I know we got some folks out. And again, just for some housekeeping information, we're going to do 2 shows next week because I'll be on vacation here in a couple of weeks. My first vacation week of the year, and some of our folks are out. I think Dr. Jacobs is out tonight. Bill Murray. He's been on a long bender, a long pub crawl. It's been a month-long pub crawl, Troy. Are we ever going to see Bill again?
I don't know. Depends on when Hooters closes. So,
Yeah, I guess so. We're going to bring in Troy in just a second. He's going to bring in our guest. It's going to be a good show tonight, by the way. Jen, how you doing? How's life in Ohio?
I'm doing great. I missed you guys last week. We were hot last week, but now very pleasant this week. It's been great. A little hazy, of course, across. And then now I've got a cat in front of me.
Cat.
But a little hazy, of course, with the Canadian wildfire smoke getting all across the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley. But we had a little sun today, but temperatures have been in the 70s today. I will take it. Lows in the 50s. So I turned that air off, and it's been good. It's been a weird Monday, but I'm hanging in there. It started off quiet and then it got weird. So now I'm here with you guys.
Monday is a good show title. James Adelot, has your Monday been weird so far?
It wasn't until about 2 o'clock, and all kinds of crazy, weird news happened in Tulsa too. So yeah, I mean, consulting the lunar calendar, and it was not a full moon, which was kind of surprising. But yeah, weird Monday here too.
I thought you might say, James, it got weird when you got on this call. But
well, I mean, weirder.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, it's always a strange situation here. So let's see, Kim, you bring order to this chaos. Thank you for your
Go for it,
maturity and your wisdom. Thank you.
It's amazing that I bring order to anything. I feel like my life is with the three little ones is just this like constant hurricane, much like we're going to be talking about today. This a rolling catastrophe that I micro organized. So maybe that this show is just like that, actually.
Yeah, I think it is. That's a great description for this show. And again, I know that Rick is out tonight, Rick Smith. So having said that, Troy, let's bring in our guest. Let's go. We got a lot to talk about tonight.
We do. And I'm real happy with the show just because these are two really close friends of mine that, and by the way, you've seen him before, at least on the right-hand side there with Landon. You saw him back on show 854. Which was about 1 year ago. In fact, it was pretty much the date that the typhoon moved across Guam. It was a week actually before that, but I was out there then, and we actually sat there on the one of the balconies of the Hilton Guam Spa and Resort, which is where they're sitting now. And so that was about a little more than about a year ago we did that. The Islet twins, what we'll call them. I'm going to call them Brandon and Landon. Brandon is on your left, and Landon is on your right. Let me tell you about both these guys. They're really close and special friends to me. I've had the chance to know them for a couple of years. Been going to Guam for a number of years. I knew their predecessors at the office out there, but had the chance the last couple of years to run across them. So we'll kind of start a little bit. We'll start on the right and talk about Landon. Landon is the warning coordination meteorologist for the Weather Forecast Office in Guam. And he's been there since June of 2010 as a forecaster, and then became the WCM back in 2020 when Chip Guard. When Chip Guard stepped back. See, this is where it gets confusing, but Chip had been out there for a very long time, and he does a bunch of different stuff. You think about it's a little bit of an unique location, and I'm going to talk about this a little later tonight, but he actually serves internationally as part of the U.S. delegation to the UN's Economic Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific and World Meteorological Organizations, a 14-member nation Typhoon Committee. So there you go. Special things for him. One of the things that impresses me by both the guys you see here is what they do for the community, and I'm going to talk about that. And by the way, they do a lot for the community, weather-related, but let me tell you, they do a lot for the community as far as things that are not weather-related. And I want to talk about that a little bit later. To your left is Brandon. Brandon is the Science and Operations Officer with the National Weather Service Forecast Office out in Guam. He's been in the Weather Service 13 years, all on the island of Guam. I'll let you, I just had this feeling they didn't beg that they both could go to Guam and end up at the Weather Forecast Office in Guam. We'll let them talk about that a little later. Brandon is the WFO Guam's Tropical Cyclone Program leader and also the satellite focal point. And one thing that he's really pushed really big time, and I want to talk about this a little later, get involved with this, is WFO Guam's presence of social media. I believe, this is Troy saying this, and I'm backing off, and I may be wrong, but I'm going to tell you that made a world of difference in the last 3 weeks in Guam. And that's my opinion. And again, I could be wrong. I'll let them tell you about where they graduated and all that kind of stuff with that. To your left is Brandon, to the right is Landon. And with that, here are your WeatherBrain colleagues tonight as well. So I guess I'll bring up the first question, then I'm gonna let everyone else kind of pile in. Now, first of all, Kim asked, are Brandon and Landon identical twins? Now, I got to remember, why do I think Brandon came first, Landon second?
Yes. So,
okay, that's what I remembered. Are y'all identical twins? I assume so.
We are identical. I actually
Okay.
look like more like his picture on the credit card than he does.
Okay.
Wow.
So, so we just came through this experience with the super typhoon in the last couple of weeks, and both of you have been out there for a while. Now that we're sort of on the downside, and by the way, before we hit air tonight, I want you to realize this. The typhoon, when was it, Brandon, landed 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
Two weeks ago now, folks. And Landon on the right-hand side still has no power, no water at his house.
Still no power, no water. Just got phone signal at my place 3 days ago, but 13 days now, no power, no water.
Yep. And that is not unique on the island of Guam. We'll kind of talk about the infrastructure as we go through tonight. There are a lot of other folks that are having to see that same thing. And, you know, we sit here, I think we're spoiled in a sense when you look at that and you think, well, you know, the power will be back up. And I had to deal with a winter storm back in 2000 and whenever that was, try to forget about it. And I was without power for 5 days and I wasn't happy. So I guess for both of you, having been at Guam, WFO Guam for a while, coming off this typhoon, both of you, what's something you learned that you really didn't maybe understand before this super typhoon? You've been through it before on the island, but I'm wondering in your positions as Sue and as warning coordination meteorologist, what's something you learned that maybe you didn't know?
I don't know. It's one of those things that we have spent 13 years engaging with schools, with the public, preparation, and all these things that you want to do before the storm. We knew communication was key. Cutting through what sometimes reaches social media as misinformation, cutting through all that and getting the actionable information to the public. But one of the big things is before a storm hits, if you're looking at a significant system, get that laundry done. Don't go into a storm with dirty laundry. If you're dealing with a long
Show title.
water outage,
Really?
you're going to need that laundry. And so some of these little things that you don't really think about in a preparation sense that really come in very important. And so that is one of them. And there's another number of things within the office, work related, that you really have to take care of to really be on top of beforehand. Make sure you got adequate staffing. And so we were able to, we had several people on leave, on vacation, but that actually worked out to our benefit. And that when we had our office shut down after the storm, we were able to put those two forecasters into the Honolulu forecast office. So they were able to do remote operations with some of the Honolulu forecasters. And it really smoothed the whole process over to allow us to shut down the office and to really have our office staff recover as families, their homes, and just to recuperate with the mental health and wellness that such a significant event will definitely try to take advantage of.
Landon?
Yeah, definitely. This had several points of interest for me. A lot of people were not aware that I was also the acting meteorologist in charge during this event. So I had the WCM duties and responsibilities, but also the MIC function in mind. And back in December of 2021, I was part of the Weather Service National Assessment on Hurricane Ida. And so that was my first time participating in a national level assessment. And I went to Slidell, interviewed the office, the RFC, the WFO, and also toured around the Gulf Coast, Grand Isle, and those areas that were heavily impacted. And I took those best practices, the lessons learned, and I used those to my skill and my wants for this office. And one of those was, we had a Category 4 typhoon coming our way. It became a super typhoon briefly before its impact. I didn't know what we would be dealing with on the other side of that storm. And so my first thing as the acting MIC was plan for a mandatory office shutdown, 48 hours minimal. And luckily, the Pacific region headquarters folks, the national level, I was speaking to Ken Graham while he was in Geneva, Switzerland, Valerie Gardner, the mental health expert within the Weather Service. They were checking up on me frequently throughout the storm. And so a big thank you and kudos to them, because that helped me get through this storm, because it's it's a full-time job and then some as the WCM, but then also being the MIC and overseeing the office function, the stability of the staff members, the mental, physical, and emotional well-being of our staff. That's a whole nother full-time job. And so I want to send a very big shout out to the Pacific region and the national headquarters for their leadership and their willingness to make that work for the shutdown. We did extend it to, I think it was 5 or 6 days. Yeah. To have the further downtime, especially with the damage to many of our staff members' houses, the lack of water, power, phones. It was a mess. But learning from that assessment in Hurricane Ida, that was a big takeaway for me in this capacity, that we wanted to do it right, that we want to focus on our staff, our people, make sure they were thought of and well taken care of. On the WCM side, one thing we started doing earlier this year was a one-page weather outlook. This goes out to a lot of our government, DoD, and core partners across the region as a way to boost our direct communications across all of the Western North Pacific, something that we've been needing for many years, to have that direct contact. We started doing supplemental outlooks as this thing was evolving in Micronesia, but it helped people with their planning, their processes. And on Friday before the storm hit on that Wednesday, we were already standing up more formal communications with Homeland Security with a heavy weather brief. And come Saturday morning, we upped the ante. And the concern was we're going into a weekend. If this thing were to speed up, we could be dealing with a Monday or a Tuesday storm coming out of the weekend when most things are shut down. So we had to formalize those communications, those thought processes with our government partners. And so that was a huge benefit. It led to our success as an island to be prepared. But I did call for a strategy meeting Saturday morning with the FEMA folks, the Homeland Security offices in the CNMI and also on Guam. And I called for that strategy meeting because I wanted to know their concerns, their needs, their wants, and their schedule, their timelines of meetings so that we could accommodate them. Because I said this may miss us, but all the indication says that somebody could very realistically take a significant hit from a major typhoon. And because of that threat, we're taking this serious. And luckily, everyone took that serious as well. And it was a trickle down across both the Guam and the CNMI governments so that we were maximally prepared. So that was a win-win. Sometimes they are a miss. You may avoid it by 20 or 30 miles. That can be a near miss to a direct hit. And when you're talking about small islands, 10 or 20 miles makes a big difference.
And well, the other thing is we had that weekend between Friday and the storm impacts. And so on Guam, across the Marianas, the media cycle really goes to sleep over the weekend. There's not a lot of live media coverage. And of course, unlike in the US, we don't have television meteorologists that really act as that megaphone for sharing information. And so we really wanted to get something into the public forum on Friday before the media cycle goes down for the weekend, because it was great weather the entire weekend, beautiful weather, great time to be at the beach, to enjoy being with families. And we wanted people to know there's something that could be heavily impacting the islands Monday through Wednesday. Don't look away from it. Keep that in the back of your minds. And so that was one of the large emphasis for our Facebook Live, just to communicate directly to the public.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was that Thursday before the storm hit on Wednesday. I'm friends with one of the general managers at the Guam Power Authority. And I sent her a WhatsApp message on Thursday and I said, you know what? It's a beautiful weekend for tree trimming. And she says, what are you trying to tell me? She's like, you better be kidding. I said, nope. So they boosted their crews up there to start tree trimming. But as you see, we're still without power, 2 weeks and counting.
Yep. Well, I want to, one other thing, and then I know that Jen wants to hop in, and I know Kim and James, Okie James, as we call him, and then James Spanel want to hop in as well. But, you know, a lot of people listen to this program, Brandon and Landon, a lot of people tune in live. There are people watching from here in the continental United States and elsewhere around the world that watch this or listen to it. What I really want people to understand, is being someone who spent a little time in Guam, is a little about the demographics, because I think that would surprise people in a sense. I mean, this is the island when I go out there, I get in a rental car and I drive all the way around the island in an hour and a half, and that's in speed limit. You can drive on the north side up, to Retidian, or you can go out to Anderson Air Force Base, and on the south end, it's a lot less developed down that south end and a lot of smaller cities. But, and then as y'all pointed out, we hadn't got an ABC, an NBC, a Fox, and all these TV stations that are there with meteorologists. In fact, none of them have. And I think there's only there's a Fox station and an NBC station, I think, on the island officially.
I just got word that the ABC affiliate and the Fox affiliate are no longer broadcasting ABC Fox out here. That was in the last couple weeks, I believe.
But I mean, it's a different environment. First of all, what is the population of that rock you sit on there, right? Guam specifically.
We've got about 155, 160,000 people.
Okay.
Significant. There's probably might be 40,000 people related to the DoD out here among all the branches. You got a lot of the Chamorros, so those are the Guam natives, and then we have a lot of Asian folks that are coming from Philippines. You got Philippines, Taiwan, Korea, and then a lot of Micronesians from the other islands of Micronesia, Chuuk, Yap, Palau, Pohnpei, and Marshall Islands, and Kosrae. So we're really that melting pot on a very small rock.
It's kind of interesting too, and then I'm going to let the rest of the folks get in here with questions. When you go to Guam, and I think this is something that I began to realize in the last couple of days and talking to y'all and us chatting and things like that. When you fly into Guam to the airport is up on sort of a plateau above Tumon Bay. It's immediately to y'all's back to y'all's left there. And you land there. The first thing you notice is buildings are either cinder block concrete or they're not. And that's something that you had to deal with in the last week. And to see some of the damage just really made me sad to some houses that people couldn't afford that stronger. But I'll tell you this, and I don't think this typhoon, 0 direct fatalities. Now, there were 2, and you can tell us about those, but those were people who made a decision to go out into the ocean. They were younger people, but there were no direct fatalities. But I'd ask you, again, how would you kind of sum up the demographics of Guam? And again, there are not a bunch of TV stations. There are several radio stations which I've depended on, but both of those have been off the air or had been.
Yeah, there were a number of radio stations. Actually, most of the broadcast outlets, I think, lost communications. The primary television station out here is now KUAM TV. Their studio was heavily damaged, so they have relocated to IT&E Telecommunications headquarters building, and they're doing some stuff on a much smaller scale over there until they can figure out what to do with their studio. But one thing, because I see the chat, there are no broadcast meteorologists out here. There is a local news, that's Pacific News Center. They used to do TV evening news as well as KUAM, but the live broadcasts, they're very few and far between, except for in the evening. One thing that I started up with KUAM TV back in July of 2020 was to partner with them with a weekly weather outlook. And so we would do a TV broadcast with KUAM morning news during the COVID pandemic. And I would do a weekly TV weather outlook. And so that was a game changer in a sorts to communicate weather in another venue. So we're still doing that 3 years later, doing those weekly weather outlooks on TV with KUAM. We've also started doing a bi-weekly Weather Wednesday column with the Pacific Daily News newspaper. I've been writing columns for the newspaper for about a year and a half now, just to communicate people anything about weather and any questions people submit to the column. We can write an article about that. And it's been a great tool to communicate things with an awareness perspective, an education and outreach perspective, and sometimes operational. But this has really boosted our presence in the community to communicate in a way that has not been done before.
That sounds so needed and very, very great that you're doing that. I'm fascinated by just trying to imagine what it's like to live on the island and have any weather knowledge or awareness. And I imagine that you have sort of a reliable, temperate climate. So it might be that people aren't even used to thinking about the weather. If there is possibly going to be a hurricane, how do people find out about it?
Usually the word is going to come from us. And so there are quite a few people that have the phone apps, the weather apps on their phone that shows the European, the GFS model or whatever. And so probably about a week before something possibly develops, may not develop, but you see these circulations that intensify in the long range models. And so people will start sharing screen grabs saying, oh, there's a typhoon coming. We're going to get hit. And so we have to be that voice of reason as forecasters, we see what models, how they perform. And some are more aggressive. Some are less aggressive. Some turn too far north, some too far west. So we're taking this model understanding and trying to put that reasoning into the public discourse. And so as forecasters, we're looking at things 7 to 10, 12, 13, 14 days out, and we're looking for those trends. Once they get within that 10-day period, we're starting to see other consensus building among the various models, and especially run to run. That really highlights, it bolsters our confidence in an outlook. And with this Typhoon Mawar, we saw that in the GFS a good 13 to 15 days out ahead of time. But initially, the passage was varying run to run about 1,500, 2,000 miles. So we knew there was some signal in the model fields. And so we kept that just into our forecast discussion, internal discussion with the AFD. And but then as it started getting closer in the 10-day range, now we're starting to see other support from the other models. We're starting to see increasing support within the ensemble members. And so then it stabilized between Guam and Yap. Yap is one of our islands about 500-600 miles to the southwest. It was solidifying between that every run. And then it started getting a little bit closer and closer and closer to Guam, roughly in the same time frame. So at that point, we're definitely starting to indicate this trend in the forecast. We're putting that into our tropical weather discussion, our TWD, and also our area forecast discussion. And then we're communicating with social media, talking about this potential. And then as we approach that Friday before the weekend, we're going full scale with the social media communications. We're talking with the partners to tell them that this very credible scenario is starting to unfold. We're not sure exactly where it's going to hit, but the confidence is significantly increased that something will be developing and moving somewhere near the region. So stay tuned.
Now I'm going to back up just a couple days, because a lot of times the emphasis is focused on the weather and on a system when it gets a name or a number fixed to it. But this thing had been brewing for several days, I think the better part of a week in Micronesia. And so even when these disturbances are sitting in place and trying to get its act together, it's dropping torrential rainfall in some parts of Micronesia, especially these islands that have large, steep mountains and they're prone to mudslides. And so that's some of the biggest causes of death in Micronesia. And so we were communicating that. And this was the first time that we ever actually engaged with the Joint Region Marianas to spin up virtual heavy weather briefs with all the compact states, all the affected areas. This was something that stemmed from several incidents over the years in some of the member states and Palau, that people are not getting the right communication, that communications received too late, or something's lost in translation. And so I worked with Joint Region Marianas to spin up these virtual heavy weather briefs with the U.S. government interests as well as the compact states, that if there's a significant threat to any of those areas, we're going to spin up these virtual weather discussions so that we can speak directly from our office to the region and give them clear, concise information, even if it is just a disturbance, but with those significant impacts. So that was a success there. And we were doing that the week before Mawar made it to Guam and the CNMI.
You know, I was going to, one real quick question about the social media, and then I'm opening it back up. And I know Jen has a question. Folks, if you haven't, go look in what Guam, the handle for Twitter is NWS Guam. And also you've got a big Facebook presence. And I want to get to that before it's all over with, because Kim was asking about the meteorologist on TV. Let me tell you that what Brandon Landon did, and by the way, when you watch these Facebook Lives, and I think some of the WeatherBrains did during the event, it wasn't just Brandon and Landon. It was the people sitting at the forecast desk. I will tell you, there was a point which I knew life was good, and I felt good about it when I don't remember which one of you did it. I think it was Brandon, that when off the side from the weather forecast office folks, they brought in the IT and I believe one of the L Tech folks. And folks, if you don't know what that is, those people keep those offices running. They keep them online, and they got them to explain, by the way, this is that the winds are howling outside the building. I do remember that. And they got them to explain that we're doing our best we can to keep the office going. And so Kim, you were asking, about the weathercast. These guys were the broadcast Mets via the Facebook page. I mean, in a sense, the Weather Service Facebook page, and job well done.
Yeah, and that was a big part of it. I knew Facebook Live was going to be big, and I think historically it's always been the WCM that's been doing the communications, and that's a lot of stress when you're dealing with a storm in Micronesia, a storm threatening Guam, a storm threatening CNMI, phone calls, interviews, meetings, briefings, and it goes on from there. When we have forecasters at the desk doing forecasts for specific areas, and so when we were spinning up those first lives, I said, okay, you're doing this. I want you to talk about this. I want you to talk about this. And I want you to talk about that. And I'll talk about this. And we'll go around the room because I really want to hear from everybody's experience. And so, yeah, like you said, when we were going into the storm, I really wanted to feature other people. And I got Dan, our IT guy from Louisiana, and I had him speak about what do we do when we lose power? How are we going to communicate? Do we stop the forecast? No, we don't. We hand them over to Hawaii if we cannot communicate. And so I really wanted to feature everybody. And I see that a lot from Ken Graham when he was director of the Hurricane Center. He would, first off, I love that he did Facebook Live. As the director of a national center, he was still engaged in the public communication doing Facebook Live and would go around the room. And I really wanted to emulate that. And so having Brandon to talk about the storm, go into the boring technical scientific details and all that junk, it was great to have that. And then to have the forecasters talk about their specific forecast zones and what people should expect in these locations, it made my job a lot easier. And so I get behind the camera and I can work the camera. And for me, that's so much easier.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
One thing about it is that touchscreen TV, we're testing it. And basically this storm, these briefings were the first test drive. And so we've been looking for something like that that could really help us with some of the presentations when we have school groups come to the office. And I had done a career day presentation at one of the middle schools, and they had this screen, and the teacher said, "Here, just plug in the HDMI. Do you want to use the touchscreen aspect? You just got to plug in the USB." And it's like, I don't think so. It's just too much to work with. A few minutes later, I decided, you know what? Let me try it. And it was so quick and easy to learn, and so it was a game changer for us. And until these Facebook Lives, the only thing that had really been drawn was one of the other forecasters drew some type of stick donkey or dog or something. It looked pretty sickly, but it said Brandon was here. So the Facebook Lives was a true test of a concept that we've been looking for, and just a game changer for the way we can communicate.
And I think it's on loan to our office right now while we experience. We may
Just
not give
test
it back. We may not give it back. They might just
One thing, Kim, I'm coming to you, I promise, but one thing, and that's not knocking, K57 or KUAM. It's not knocking those people. They still got a job to do.
Yep.
But in this case, they were sort of out of the loop. I mean, they were out of the loop. You had no choice. And what you did, I thought was so important. Kim, I'm sorry. I've cut you off more than once.
You're fine. Yeah, this is such a great conversation. And now I have like two asides I'm going to try to wrap into one. A couple of minutes ago, you mentioned that the population of the island is about 25% DoD personnel. So between them and their families, it represents a really large share of the population. And it just seems like a really special and different kind of population to message to. You mentioned the core partners, and I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about who those people are that you're messaging to. What are all the outfits that are out there? What's the geopolitical significance of Guam and the also significance of keeping it going?
Yeah,
that has to be important.
Yeah, it's a full-time job, and we're always communicating because there's always a threat. There's always something happening in this broad region at any given time around the year. But specifically, our core folks, those are the Homeland Security offices of Guam and the CNMI. We also work with the FEMA FIT. That's the local team over here. I coordinate with them regularly, and then it gets escalated to the governor. So after this typhoon event, the governor and we have each other on speed dial, and we talk every time there's even a threat. We're talking to each other. She calls me 3 o'clock in the morning, but I'm usually up at that time because I'm working teleconferences in the States. But that's here in the domestic area. But in the compacts, there's the DECM, that's the Department of Environment, Climate Change, and Emergency Management of the Federated States of Micronesia. Each of the 4 states, they have their own disaster coordination offices. And then in Palau, there's the NEMO, National Emergency Management Office, and in the Marshall Islands, the National Disaster Management Office in Majuro. And so I just met up with those folks about 3 weeks ago when I was working a Tsunami Ready program with UNESCO and the International Tsunami Information Center. I got back from that trip and went right into typhoon mode. But we have so many partners. Those are the government folks. We also have the DOD, the Joint Region Marianas, the military folks, and all their interests in the region. And this has become a more significant thing out here because of the threats from China, Russia, and North Korea. So there's a lot of buildup. There's a lot of capacity building over here with the military. Then we have USAID. That's like the international version of FEMA that oversees operations in the compacts and also the long-term planning and planning of assets for stuff like the post-El Nino dry season drought that's going to be coming January and beyond next year. And we're already communicating that the Republic of Palau, they're already initiating the base level water conservation measures. Even though we're way above normal for rainfall for the year across the region, they're already implementing the baseline water conservation measures to get it in people's minds that we're going to start conserving water, because when it gets to be a major threat, it'll be that much easier to keep conserving and escalate things. And that's going to be coming up in 2024, the first half of the year. We're expecting a dry season. We got a lot of dry tree debris, all this destructive nature from the typhoon. We have trees everywhere just down, and they're dying, they're rotting. It's going to be wildfire fuels coming up in another 8 to 10 months. But partners, we have partners everywhere, every direction, the Red Cross, Salvation Army, and then on and on from there at the NGO level. But we're communicating, there's needs. It's endless, but it's a complex web of people that we communicate and partner with to make sure that everyone on every island across this region, no matter how many capabilities or not, they're getting the information.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, it's not one thing just to be doing the daily forecast for the next few days. We're not just looking at the 1 to 2 week forecast of potential tropical cyclone or high impact weather events, but we're also having to put into scope the seasonal and intra-seasonal patterns. So this El Nino La Nina change, what that means for next year, because some of these international organizations need to have that early awareness to start preparations for mobilization. So it's a busy aspect out here.
Guys, it's great to see you. I wanted to read to you one of the emails that came in from one of our Brainy fans. They are great. And I really think this is important for you guys to hear. And please take this back to your office. But this is kind of in conjunction with your Facebook stuff. But this is from Lloyd Colston, KC5FM. The 8 o'clock Facebook briefing just before landfall was outstanding. Number 1, information was conveyed in a calm fashion and detailed impacts so viewers could understand and act. 2, action statements were sprinkled throughout. 3, questions were answered. And 4, Guam Emergency Management was also present answering questions in chat. It was an excellent example of the team working the dream. The briefing also showed the humanity of the National Weather Service folks as they brought up staff members to tell how the storm is impacting their lives. So you guys are making an impact, and I try to say it as often as I can that the part of the National Weather Service that we really should focus on is your service. And thank you so much for doing that and working so hard to keep people safe.
Yeah, and I will say that's one of my goals since I took over the WCM position, is really to humanize the office. And we've sought to do that through the Weather Ready Nation Outlook, our engagement with ambassadors across the region. We started doing a twice a year newsletter, And I asked for forecasters to write a column about whatever they're interested in, whatever they're working on in the office, and to send me a photo, because I want names to faces, and I want people in the region to see who our forecasters are, and that we are people doing stuff in the community, not just weather stuff, but other projects that you're involved in, like philanthropic efforts that Brandon and I have participated in for many years, but humanize the Weather Service. And so that's been such a key aspect, because we are a government agency, but we're so much more than that. We're people, and we're people that deal with the same struggles that we're telling people to prepare for. And so that 8 o'clock Facebook Live, that was a pivotal moment, because we're really working, like the email said, we're working with Homeland Security. And I asked them before, I said, do y'all want to come over and broadcast with us or anything? They said, no, we're just going to share your feed. I said, if you can be following the feed as well and be responding to civilian government questions, while we have forecasters responding to weather-related questions, we'll have the Guam and CNMI Homeland Security offices also sharing and responding to questions, and that works so well. And it got to the point that they started giving me the JIC releases, Joint Information Center releases, and keying in on certain information they wanted me to broadcast, because they knew that we had such a huge following, much larger in numbers than most, actually all of the media outlets over here can dream of. We had such a large number of viewers that was the place to put information out. And so we were doing exactly that.
Yeah, and one of the other things is we're going to bring a little guest on. This is my 5-year-old son, Liam. And
Yeah.
say hello.
Hey.
The Facebook Lives, one of the things is it's not just the weather forecast, but it is really trying to communicate to the families with children, because it's been 21 years since a significant typhoon has hit Guam. And so it's going to be scary. The winds are going to be howling. The windows and doors are whistling and rattling. Trees are falling. Power is out. And when it's at nighttime, you can't see anything. You just hear it, and it's scary. And so I just really wanted to communicate to the parents, just talk to the children and reassure them that it's going to be scary, but you're going to be all right. And because my wife Shirley and Liam, they stayed at home. We had some friends stay with us. Didn't have confidence in what their roofs would look like after the storm. So I felt assured knowing that Shirley and Liam were not home alone, but I did miss having them, and I just wish I could have said goodnight, been there to talk to them. But for the parents who did have their kids, just reassure them and let them know it will be scary. It's okay to be scared, but that it's going to be okay.
Yeah, that was another first for us. I think it was on Saturday afternoon, when we were escalating our communications. I put in a slide for mental health and emotional wellness. That's something that we've never formally discussed, but this is coming from operating the social media out of our office after Super Typhoon U2 hit Saipan and Tinian to our north, and also Typhoon Sudalor in 2015. People up there are still dealing with PTSD from those major typhoons years ago. There's still some distrust of the government authorities because of the lack of communications at the time that have since improved dramatically. But people are still shell-shocked. They're worried. They're stressed. So I started pushing the 988. That's a suicide mental health hotline, the national hotline, 988, that we need to look after ourselves, our neighbors, our colleagues, people around us, check in on them. And if there's a serious, significant concern, that the 988 hotline is valid and ready for action. And so I confirmed that with the EOC racks, the communications and behavioral health folks, and they tested the hotlines from both Guam and the CNMI, and they said 988 is ready to go. And if someone local cannot respond and facilitate, it'll go to a national level person that's on standby. And so that was the big plus. I don't know if there was a flurry of calls to 988, but I'm sure there were probably calls. And we really wanted to address that both within our office, our organizations, the EOC, who are full of people working around the clock for this emergency, but still with your family and friends at home suffering from whatever it is that may be happening. So that was a first for us as well.
Hey, again, thank you very much for being with us this evening. I guess my question is kind of two parts too, but they're not related, so I can't gracefully weave them together. But what other hazards does Guam face besides this? I assume tsunamis would be in there too, but also what kind of collaboration do you have with the military bases, even if it's not this high end of a threat, just kind of daily? Do you have any kind of collaboration with them on forecasting or?
Well, actually, that is one of the avenues that has really become closer to being more formalized. And so we've always been willing to support the DoD and various interests. Of course, you got the Air Force in the north end of Guam. They have their own weather detachment, primarily tasked with aviation related responsibilities. And then you got the Navy that gets their information from the METOC. I'm not sure where the weather office is that they get their information, but we're always on hand to interface and collaborate. Otherwise, the Joint Typhoon Warning Center in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, they provide all the typhoon related forecasts, all the tropical cyclones. And so they are DoD centric, but we also use their forecast as a basis for our forecast tracks. And so the concern is making sure the civilian side of the local governments, Guam, the CNMI, including the islands of Saipan, Tinian, and Rota, are lockstep in response and decision-making with the DoD. We don't want that disconnect between the DoD taking these actions and the civilian government not taking certain actions. So that has really requires a close collaboration between the local governments and the DoD, but then also the National Weather Service to be able to infuse some of this forecast and timing of impacts. So it's a bit of a ballet to really coordinate among the different entities, but also other support with the DoD interest with marine related hazards or just business as usual. And so we're seeing the need to really ramp up some training, whether every 6 months or 12 months, as DoD folks rotate on and off island every couple of years. There is a need to educate them to the weather hazards that affect Guam, tropical cyclones being front and center usually, but we've got volcanoes out here. All of the Marianas are volcanic origins. We have the Marianas Trench, so earthquake rip currents. Rip currents are among the deadliest natural hazards out here. And I don't know how well you can see on this behind us, but the edge of the reef is that little band of white. There's a couple of really strong rip currents out there any time of the year, any time of the day. And so those locations don't change, but how do you spot them? How do you know when you're in danger or not? So there's a lot of education that has to be done. And so we're looking for how we can really bolster those efforts from our office to the public and to the DoD. We frequently visit the schools. If you can educate the students, then the students will spread that information to the parents. And so my son Liam, he just finished up his pre-K school year, and he's already coming home. If we get a tsunami, are we safe? And so I've got him in my lap in the office, and so we're looking at the typhoon. It's like, is that tsunami going to hit us? Like, well, that's not a tsunami, that's a typhoon, but you're very close, and you're identifying those circular storms. So the children are learning, and so it's a massive grassroots effort to educate. And a lot of the Micronesians that live on Guam, they don't speak English. Their children in the school system do speak English. So you educate the children will bring that home. So we're trying so many different fronts to educate.
And that's actually one of the big projects. I and one of my colleagues from Yap State, Micronesia, he was here on Guam for a period of time. And we contacted the Federated States of Micronesia, the consulate office here on Guam. And we had a meeting with the consul general. And I really wanted to ask the question, what are their needs? What are their concerns for weather and safety and preparedness for their Micronesian community here on the islands? But I wanted to expand that further, not just on Guam, but also across Micronesia, their needs and concerns, but then also to the states. We have a large Micronesia population that is migrating gradually to the continental United States right now. And there's clusters of people all in different cities and states around the United States. And these are people from the tropics of the West Pacific that have never dealt with tornadoes, severe thunderstorms, hailstorms, winter weather. And so one of the things that I want to start working on is a mass translation project of taking Weather Service materials, outreach materials, and getting those translated to the 4 main languages of the Federated States. But then also hold a series of town hall meetings here on Guam and get deep into the communities where most of the Micronesians live and find out what are their thoughts, concerns, and worries and fears of weather and typhoons on Guam. And we are going toward an El Nino year, so we're expecting a whole lot more activity here on Guam later this year. I want to find out what are their needs, worries, and fears and concerns, because hearing from the people drives what we do as a public service office. And we can preach and direct and educate people all we think that they want to know, but it may not be what they want to know or what they need to know. And so it's that two-way conversation. And I think the town hall meetings is going to be one of the best ways to do that.
You know, one thing I'm going to, James, hop in on top of you for just a second. And this may be with the, where the Twins don't like Troy anymore with the question, but I think one thing we ought to address at this point on the DoD side is that the Doppler weather radar on Guam is not owned and operated by the National Weather Service. And whether you know that or not, it's operated by U.S. Air Force, right?
Correct.
Right. And I think I'm afraid to ask this because I haven't really asked you the last couple of days, but is that radar still standing?
Yes.
It's out of service, right?
It still stands, but it is currently out of service.
Okay. Okay.
Apparently it took some damage, but not catastrophic. But there's also some power issues too. We're not sure what the power issues line up from the main highway all the way to the radar site. So there are several issues at hand, and I hope they will get resolved at some point sooner than later.
Okay. James, I'm sorry I interrupted you from Tulsa.
Oh, no, I'm just punning badly in the chat. How does DoD, and this is kind of, I don't know that the question really matters, but do they focus any messaging in something like this toward the dependence of the personnel on bases, or are they focused largely on operations?
Yes, they do an extensive communications campaign with the folks on the base, both the military folks, but also the dependents. So there's a lot of social media engagement going on. They share a lot of our posts, our live broadcasts. So they're very much in sync with us. And I think that's one of our greatest assets here on the island is that we have one voice. And so when it comes to the media, the Weather Service, and the government partners, we're like a three-legged stool. You take one of those legs away, that stool falls. And so we do have one coordinated voice, and once the information comes from us, whether it's these one-pager Outlook documents or a briefing deck of slides, that information is then compiled into a communication across all the entities through the Joint Information Center at Homeland Security. And it's very consistent, it's very concise, and it's very coordinated. And so I think that's one of our greatest strengths here as an island.
And then also the military, they have quite a few Facebook pages that they communicate a lot of announcements. MWR, Morale, Welfare and Recreation, both Air Force and Navy, and then a lot of the command-related Facebook pages. So they're communicating a lot of the stuff. They're pushing out a lot of the content that we're putting on our Facebook pages. But WhatsApp is really big in the islands. From my discussions with folks stateside, WhatsApp is not as frequently used. But at least for the islands out here, a lot of people are on WhatsApp. It is the grapevine. So if you can get some type of content put on there, and preferably a PDF or an image that has just a little bit of text on it that cannot be edited by some other recipient, it will spread like wildfire. And so that is one way that we really try to insert the messaging. So what we put on Facebook, others will take it off, and then it will enter the WhatsApp grapevine.
Hey guys, let me ask you this. I've worked a lot of big events in my time, and I always like to look back and review things and think, what could we have done better? So here's my question. If you could wave a magic wand and go back, 3 weeks or whatever before the event, what would you do differently that would make the warning process better?
God, that's a tough question. Because all in all, I think it was such a well-handled event. We were way ahead of our time as far as timelines with watches and warnings. That worked much to the island's favor. I do have some personal changes I would make. I would have taken more time to prepare. I gave a briefing, I think it was Tuesday evening, as we were telling people sundown Tuesday to sun up Thursday. That was going to be your your time frame that you need to be in shelter, sundown Tuesday to sunup Thursday. I gave a briefing, I think it was 5 o'clock that evening on Tuesday, and then was heading back to the office. And I told him, I said, my concern right now is we have a super typhoon that's barreling toward us, and we're telling people to prepare. But I'm one of those people that need to prepare, and I haven't done it because I'm so busy at work. I woke up at 2:30 Tuesday morning and was going at it all day, and finally took a 60-minute nap Wednesday morning around 3 a.m. But the mayor of this village of Dededo where I live, she called me. She's like, so you need help at your house? I said, yeah, I have not even had a chance. And she said, I'm sending my guys over to your house right now. We're going to put some sandbags around your house and shutter your house the best we can. And they did. And they were lifesavers, my gosh. And to have the mayor call me and offer that for her staff, that was a very emotional moment for me. But yeah, definitely take that time to prepare. That's a big thing for me, because we're so focused on communicating and pushing information and coordinating and doing stuff that your own personal needs are often unmet. And so storm-wise, communications-wise, I think it was exceptionally well. I really can't think of anything I would change otherwise at this point. It was a fantastic event. We really saw the staff come together in ways that I didn't foresee. The Facebook Live broadcast that really took a life of their own as they evolved throughout the storm event. It was just a very well culminated event, especially working with the governor and local leaders to communicate and make sure everyone's prepared.
Well, that was another thing is with all these, the briefings and the Facebook Lives, it really created like the nexus for the office messaging. So these little tidbits of the message would go into our local statements, the HLS, our hurricane local statement, the island-based specific impacts and timing, but it also kind of factored into how other forecasters responded to phone calls for information, different media interviews, local and off-island. And so that was a true way of unifying the office message that had not really been done before. One thing I would change though is move our office TC exercise 1 month earlier, because usually we aim for the May timeframe for our office exercise. And so where it used to be just our AWIPS, our weather computer exercise, just inputting the wind field of the tropical cyclone into our gridded forecast, we've expanded it now to include briefing, interviews, working with a live audience, social media,
questions, answers, all that good stuff.
It's the stuff that the Kansas City National Weather Service Training Center does, but we wanted to localize it and really make it West Pacific centric. And we actually just got through the first part of that exercise, visiting the EOC. We've never had a visit for the office forecasters to go to the Emergency Operations Center and meet people in their turf. So we wanted to do that, have a face-to-face meeting so people get to know each other. We've got such a big staff of new forecasters. Most have never been through an actual tropical cyclone. The past 3 years of La Nina has been nothing for us. So this was the first time that the forecasters have gone through it.
Actually, 3 of our new guys were off island for the storm. So
Yeah.
they missed out, unfortunately.
Wow.
And so the thing is, do we proceed with the training?
Yes.
And I would say 100% yes, because now we've got that experience. Everybody has got some type of takeaway from this tropical cyclone. And now let's take our experiences and now let's put it all together and piece all those little experiences together to see the full picture. And now I think this training is going to have all that much more meaning.
So let me, and maybe you covered this earlier. I'm dealing with some local thunderstorms here. Here, stateside, evacuation orders are issued, and people leave. They get out. It's kind of hard to do on an island. Did anybody want to leave the island? What was the airport operations like? Was there any panic or any big problems related to that? Are people just trying to get out of there?
Sometimes if there's enough head time, and I think this one was one of those cases where there's enough lead time. I don't know if any tourists were evacuated back to their home countries or they all just stayed put. I imagine a lot of them did stay put in the hotels where they're also fairly safe. But I'm not sure, maybe some of the military dependents might have been shipped off island with some of the assets as well. But most people stay put in their houses. We're reinforced concrete buildings were reinforced walls, ceilings, roofs. And so people hunker down. But there are some wood and tin structures, people that live in the lower income housing, and they go to the evacuation shelters. And I was meeting with the governor. We were looking at the potential for a worst case scenario for southeastern Guam. If this thing was going to be tracking right over southern or just south of Guam, we were looking at the potential for some significant storm surge, similar to what was experienced last in, I think, 1990s with typhoons Yuri and maybe Russ, where there was some significant surge down there on the windward shores. And so when I told this to the governor at her residence, she said, I don't know if we're allowed to do this, but I want to get a mandatory evacuation. And so immediately after that discussion with her, they issued mandatory evacuations for low-lying coastal areas. And we used a 10-foot proxy based on the mapping available from Guam Homeland Security to get those key areas evacuated. And of course, we can't force the evacuation. We can't force people to leave their homes. You can't penalize them for staying, but they did issue a mandatory evacuation to get people out of there. Fortunately, that did not materialize because it shifted northward. And so the storm surge was considerably less along southeastern Guam, but more of the island felt the stronger impacts with the south side, the southeast side of the eye wall. But yeah, we have a number of facilities, schools rated for different levels of category typhoons that people will pack into. And I think we probably had just under, maybe around 1,000 people.
Yeah,
1,300.
30% capacity.
Okay.
So we had extra space in the shelters, but that was some information that we shared on the Facebook Lives, is to encourage people, if you're not in a fully reinforced concrete shelter, get out or house, find somewhere else to be. This is not one to be to risk it.
Brandon, Landon, one thing that we've had here in the United States and the Gulf Coast Atlantic seaboard is one of the tools in the National Weather Service toolkit has been the implementation in the last couple of years of something called the Extreme Wind Warning product. I found it interesting that even you and I both, we all of us talked a little bit in chat that this was the first year it was implemented as an operational product for WFO Guam. How'd that go? Because you ended up issuing that first one, right?
Yeah, it was. I don't know whether to think it's coincidental or ironic, but the EWW has been around for a while for the Weather Service. It took a while longer to get to the Pacific region, and so there was a concern. Well, let's see how it works for the CONUS. Let's see how it works with the Gulf Coast and the Eastern Seaboard. And so a few years ago, it was added to the Honolulu CPHC, the Central Pacific Hurricane Center, and the Hawaii jurisdiction. And so the other concern was, how useful would it be amid all the other texts that we are issuing? Because when a typhoon is within the radar range of Guam, we're issuing hourly bulletins that are radar fixes showing where the center of the eye, the characteristics of the eye, the intensity, the motion. And so we are sending out so much information. So what niche could the EWW add into the communication out of the office? And so it was one of those things that we internally discussed. And when I became Sue last year, I decided to really go ahead and push for it. For the reason is that we've got information that is telling people a typhoon is coming, a significant typhoon is coming. But are those winds going to be 150, 130, 110 miles per hour? Or are you going to be lucky and you're 30 miles away from the center and those winds are maybe category 1 strength? So the benefit is having that specialized tailored product that will isolate a smaller area, or in the case of the CNMI, Rota, Tinian, Saipan, very small islands, that your island is about to get the worst of the worst. If you are in a sheltered location, that might not be adequate. You want to find an interior room of that sheltered location and to really communicate that threat before everything goes crazy. And so communications wise, most people still had access to social media and before the eyewall came over. So it was crazy. I had been working on refreshing our social, or our directives in the office for tropical cyclones, inputting that EWW section. And so it's easy if you got weather radar, you're looking at the velocity data. Where are those strongest winds of the eye wall? It's an easy open shut case where those strong winds are. But what if the radar were to go down? We've got precedent for that. Can we still issue the EWW? And so I went through a long thought process, and I kind of emailed my thoughts to Landon, because we never talk face to face. It's just always through email. And
I hardly ever see. We're twins. We live 4 miles apart. We're down the hall from each other. We hardly ever see each other.
The telepathy doesn't quite work. But I emailed some of my thoughts to the regional operations center. It's like, okay, do these steps make sense? And so we got a updated JTWC forecast track. We've got the intensity, satellite-based intensity of a significant typhoon. It's very close to the islands. You're not going to have much deviation within a couple of hours. How about microwave satellite pass? If you got a nicely timed microwave satellite pass, you can ignore the parallax depending on where that storm is in relation to the center of that pass. Some of the other considerations, like, okay, we got to meet this criteria, this one, and then only if we can meet all those criteria, everybody in the office, management and forecasters of the same opinion, then we can issue that EWW. And so this was one of those Hail Mary decision-making processes, just in case the radar was down. And would you believe it? We had to go through every one of those steps to make the decision to issue the EWW. And so that directive input was not even 2 weeks ago, and we exercised it to the fullest for 140 mile per hour satellite-based intensity estimate of a Category 4 typhoon.
So I'm going to pivot a little bit away from the typhoon talk, and I'm going to put the focus right on you guys. I've just been thinking about how unique it is to have brothers who are both meteorologists and, have worked your way up, and then twins. And so how did you guys get involved in weather? Like, what is your background? And I have twin nephews, and usually if one is somewhere doing something, the other one is right there doing it too. So it was a case that one of you got started and you're like, I'm doing it too? Or how did all this come about? I'm really curious.
Well, it started way back, but long story short, he copied me. No, it was my drive for weather that started back in, I think it was March of 1993. And you think back, the superstorm of 93. And for some reason, that storm was a game changer for me, being 1 year old. No, we were 12 years old at the time. And the devastation growing up in eastern North Carolina, just south of Norfolk, Virginia. I remember the meteorologists on the TV stations in Norfolk saying it's going to start out like a hurricane, then it's going to get calm, and then the second half's going to come. It's going to be like full-blown blizzard. And so we had all this flooding in our yard, which is fascinating. We loved it when our yard flooded because we have these large farmland drainage canals going through our property. And so we are always fascinated by the flooding, how close the water would get to our house and if it could come any closer. But then we had trees down. They were coming down in waves. We had about 70 some pine trees in our yard. Our neighbors had more, and they were just snapping, uprooting, breaking in half. And it was just terrifying. It was incredibly scary. We were in a closet for most of the night with helmets on our heads thanks Mom. We had motorcycle helmets on our head in the closet, and it was horrifying. It was terrifying, and we were fascinated by it. And so when the snow and the ice started coming down that night and froze everything down, we did drive around. We doing what people aren't supposed to do. We were driving around.
Our parents drove us, not us.
Our parents drove us. But the stoplights are down, the street lights are out. It's just incredible. It was all inspiring. And it's like, I wanted to learn more about how it can go from fair weather to disaster so quick, what causes it, and then how to warn people of it. And so I followed that through high school. I learned that North Carolina State University had a meteorology program. So for lack of anything else for a college degree, I started looking at North Carolina State for meteorology and to do something with weather forecasting.
For me, I was actually more geared toward looking into music. And so I was going through high school planning to major in music. And for my senior year of high school, I had to do this big project. And so I did it, a music focus. I enjoyed it, but I really wasn't sure what I was going to do, how I was going to make use of that in a career standpoint. So I knew I was doing well with the math and science, and I enjoyed weather. So I decided to maybe refocus toward weather. I did not act on it for several weeks because I knew people were going to say, "Oh, you're just going to do weather because your brother's doing it. You just want to follow him." And it's like, you know what? Once I got over that, I changed my focus and ended up doing a year at a community college in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, and then transferred to North Carolina State University. But fast forward, graduated in 2005, and then a couple of years, we're putting out resumes, applications, and just getting nowhere. And so we ended up getting part-time jobs, working at the hockey arena, working at a restaurant. I think we were working probably 4 part-time jobs. We're sharing a car, so working all at the same time. But you got bills to pay, and you want to try to save some money as well. I ended up starting to apply for positions that wanted a master's degree. We only had bachelors, but I got one nibble out of a company in Oklahoma, and it's like, I don't remember applying to Oklahoma. As I looked closer, I found out it was the Marshall Islands, really in the middle of nowhere Pacific. And I remember applying for it that if I were to be offered the job, would I really want to do something so extraordinary and crazy? And I remember telling myself, yes, it's only a 2-year contract. Treat it like a grad school experience. Get as much experience as possible. Learn as much as you can. And then if you don't like it, after 2 years, come back home. So I ended up interviewing. I was very blunt, my strengths, my weaknesses. I did not want any false pretenses. And that afternoon, they offered a position for me. And within 2 days, 2 or 3 days, I had a passport on my doorstep. And I was in Kwajalein, Marshall Islands within a month. And so that changed everything. And so I see James is asking about Aeromet. It is the successor of Aeromet, ATSC, right there near the National Weather Center and Norman. But was out there for 2 years. After about 6 months, they had another position opening. And so I told Lane, it's like, if you want to get your foot in the door for weather, this is it. And I'm working my butt off in this office, doing a lot of good stuff. They may gamble that you might be an equally decent worker, and not just a one strike with a good twin and then you get a bad twin. So they they eventually took the gamble. He came out, and so that brought us both into the Pacific. And 2008, I took a vacation to Guam. I was faced with either going to Hawaii or going to Guam. And I told the Continental Airlines, I said, I want to go to Guam for a week. He said, what are you going to do in Guam for a week? Most people stay for a couple of days. And it's just like Hawaii, just a lot of Japanese people. I said, I'd rather go to Guam and see what most Americans don't see, have that extra unique experience. So I fell in love with the island and decided my next job would have to be out here and try to get a permanent vacation. And so a year later that happened. And so I came out in early 2010.
That's very cool. I remember, and I put in chat there, those ads for those positions were always on the map board when I was at OU way back in the day. And one of the things was you had to have a pre-employment dental exam.
Yeah.
And I remember asking somebody about that, and they said, yeah, there's no dentist there, and it can quickly become an emergency if you a tooth or something like that. But how did you all, what like lifestyle questions on Guam? How often do you get back to the mainland, and how often do the people on Guam that have come from the mainland generally get back to the mainland? Or is it something your families just all want to come out there and not have you come visit them because you're in paradise?
Yeah, it was pretty tough in Kwajalein. Brandon's working to get a plug for the computer, but when we were in Kwajalein, and I had gone back to North Carolina State to get a second degree in science education to teach school. So when Brandon had contacted me that there was a job opening, I thought about it for a couple of weeks, and it was an anthropology professor who I was taking his class. He had spent time in the Marshall Islands and also in New Guinea. He said, whatever you do, take the job and don't look back. So I think if it wasn't for the fact I was taking that course at that time, I probably never would have come over here. So he inspired me. I dropped out of college. I'm a college dropout, and came over here and have not looked back. And So it's been a good ride. I later ended up in Guam. I lived in Oklahoma City area for a couple of weeks. Saw my first and second tornado ever, working at the headquarters office there, eventually planning to go to Huntsville to work remote operations for Kwajalein. But I ended up quitting there and coming over to Guam when the job opening here fell in my lap. But getting from Kwajalein to the States was very difficult. In 2.5 years, I made 3 trips off island. One was, I think, 5 days to Guam, had another 5 days to Hawaii. And then there was a point that I did a 3-week trip back home to North Carolina. And that was it for my travel. We have United Airlines. They fly daily through Kwajalein. One day is Hawaii to Guam. The other one's Guam to Hawaii, going through all the islands. And so that was, you got homesick after a while because it was the first time being away from home. But being on Guam, you can travel a whole lot more frequently. It's still a nice little price tag to travel to and from the States, but we have so much more access to flights to get out of the island, to travel to Asia, to the States. And then with the opportunities to go to the States for work purposes, we can tack on some leave to visit family and friends in the States. So it's a whole lot more accessible to travel in and out of Guam.
Is there much World War II tourism?
There is. I don't know how much it is, but there's definitely a good World War II presence over here. We do a lot of hiking out here, at least before we became managers and got too busy. But we would travel and hike all over the Guam, and you find old artifacts from the war. And so a lot of times before buildings are being constructed, they do a site excavation and look for any UXO, unexploded ordnance. And so we do have to have that concern because there's bombs and debris all over the place that could be ready to blow in some of the jungle areas, even in some of our populated areas. But people do come from time to time. There might be memorials in different places where there are massacres, where there was mass slaughters during the war. And so around July 21st, that's the Liberation Day for Guam. There's a lot of memorials going on just to remember the time and to remember the loss.
Let me ask you guys a question. Here in the States, we have a problem with social media. And again, it's a marvelous thing. What you guys did on Facebook was incredible. But at the same time, there can be some disinformation floating around. The tweeter and the face bag and the talk and the Insta and all these things. I mean, we have some people, and some are kids, and they're going to post a 384-hour output from the deterministic GFS. Oh, major hurricane to strike in 15 days. Plan now. Stay tuned. Click and follow and like me for exclusive information you won't find anywhere else. And I don't think they mean any harm, but I do think there's some malicious accounts that are using this for monetization purposes, and they're using fear. Do you have a problem with misinformation on social media there in Guam by any chance?
We do. And it may or may not be local to Guam or maybe originating from some other source. But since Super Typhoon Haiyan struck the Philippines in 2013, we get a lot of traffic from the Philippines. People asking if something near us is going to affect the Philippines, if it's going to be a problem. And sometimes it might be near the Marshall Islands, way out to our east. And my response to them, if I respond, is wait for it to get to Guam first, and then we'll talk. But otherwise, we defer them to Pagasa in the Philippines. But we do have a lot of misinformation. I see videos of me giving a briefing from 2018 with Typhoon Mawar in September 2018. And this one particular video surfaces every so often, and it's done at several cycles. And once it comes through me, it comes from multiple WhatsApp groups that I'm involved in with the mayors, the EOC, other community chat groups. Once it comes to me, if it becomes more of a flurry, I'll contact Homeland Security and get with the public affairs, and I'll say, are you getting this information too? And if it's confirmed that they're also getting dinged on it, we'll put out a joint statement to listen to the Weather Service and the Homeland Security for official weather information. Sometimes when it's more current, like the next 10 to 15 days, and we start seeing this information, this misinformation coming out quick, people trying to be first, to say it first. I got it right before they did. We will hit that directly on social media. We will take a direct stance on it and communicate against it, confirming or denying whatever it may be they're communicating. But I've told people in the past, we're not going to be the first one to say this is going to happen. we're going to be the most realistic in saying something's going to happen, because we want to make sure that we don't cry wolf, but we have the most credible, logical, scientifically backed up information available, because we have to be responsible. We're the warning agency, and we don't want to be overboard or underboard with our communications.
And one thing to add to that is are the graphics that we issue for these tropical cyclone forecast tracks. Typically, until recently, we've never had access to the probabilistic tropical cyclone forecast tracks the way you see from the NHC or CPHC that is a product of those early arrival times, most likely arrival times. That this is the first year we've actually had those available for us. And so the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, they issue the forecast. Then the Central Pacific Hurricane Center, co-located with the Honolulu Forecast Office, they produce these graphics, and then we have them available on our webpage. This was the first storm that we actually publicly used them in a lot of our briefings. And so it really was, it was a game changer in contextualizing the possibilities when we're still several days out of it arriving into the Marianas. So we initially put up some tropical storm warnings for some of the outer islands well to our south in Micronesia. And so the 5-day track, the 120-hour probabilities of tropical storm winds, they were just starting to approach the Marianas. And so we were able to communicate that trend as every day the storm came a little bit closer, those probabilities gradually increased. We talked about the eventual bobbles in the track, that it could go left or right, but having this probabilistic type of graphics, it really accounted for all these little changes, faster, slower, that made it a lot easier to visualize and communicate. And it was just a true help in talking to the public about these events. A lot of times in the past, people get very focused on that center line. And when we have a deterministic forecast track that shows the exact track based on that one-time forecast, and then the width of the winds, people focus on that. And then they forget what is still in the realm of possibility. So having these graphics available really helped in the process of communication.
And one more question before I go back over to Troy. The internet access during this typhoon, did you guys maintain communication the entire time? It seemed like you were in touch the whole time, just from an observer watching from a distance here.
Yeah, fortunately, we had communications. We were running with my work phone on the office Wi-Fi. We had Wi-Fi capability at the office the whole entire time, as well as after the storm. So that was, thank God, a lifesaver that we could communicate in that realm. But yeah, we were operationally available. We could still transmit operations and forecasts even after the storm passage. But we did opt to shut down immediately after the warnings were dropped, so that staff could tend to their needs. But we never lost capability to operate and function.
Yeah, we had communicated to the EOCs that
and right on
there we
time,
go.
right
Yeah.
on time. We talk about internet access and it goes away.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. One of the things too, when they get back in just a little bit, and they will, that's at the Hilton, so they should be in pretty good shape. But these guys do pretty amazing things in the community as well.
Troy.
There we are.
We lost communications.
Okay. Well, that y'all back with us on sound anyway?
yes, got you.
Okay. One thing that I know as part of my trip last year, and my friend Carl Deal, retired police officer from here in South Central Texas, and I, when we came out there, we had the opportunity twice last year in our visit out there to go with Landon and Brandon to some of the things that they do that are not weather related that I wanted y'all to know about. Both of these guys have, since the last year, essentially have 2 Guinness World Records, which are now in the books out there. And I also want to plug the fact that Carl and I were, when we were out there, had the opportunity with Landon to go to some of the work that he's co-founded with a group there in Guam on suicide prevention and awareness. I will tell you, knowing these guys pretty well, this means a whole lot to them. And y'all's, we may not have the video up, but I think we got the audio up. But I want to talk about how you got the Guinness Book of World Records twice in the last year. And then also, Landon, we had the chance to meet at the Payless conference, grocery store conference room last year about this time with Guam police and all the people that were there, part of the Suicide Prevention Foundation. Some of the amazing work you do. Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, and so we like to stay involved in the community. We don't just sit behind a computer all day. And Brandon's, I think, going to try to hotspot, see if we can get a better action. But we like to stay active in the community, active outside of the office, whether it's hiking, paddleboarding, and stuff. But one of our childhood favorite toys growing up were Lincoln Logs. If you know the little wooden toys that have been around for over 100 years now, the Lincoln Logs, we grew up with those many years ago at our grandmother's house. Our mother, we were a single mother, and she was working rotating shift work at a nursing home. We spent a lot of time at our grandmother's, and our aunts and uncles, they had Lincoln Logs from the 1960s. And so we were fascinated with those. We never really took to Lincoln Logs or to Legos, but we were so fascinated with the Lincoln Log. And so we've been collecting those for many years. We used to get them from the JCPenney Christmas catalog, and that was all we wanted for Christmas through elementary school years. But we came across a lot of them in 2018 at a store here on Guam for a really good price. Buying the empty 3. And we knew that we had the capability to bust some records, but we wanted to do it in style, just a tall structure of one with numbers, but we wanted to do would leave a mark on the community. So we did a test tower. We had a 17-foot ceiling span on stairway, and we did a test tower, but we knew we needed more blocks. So we contacted the manufacturer for this off-brand. You have the Lincoln Logs brand, but then you have the Tumble Tree brand. And so we have more wooden building blocks, which is what we were. And we contacted them. We got several orders of these blocks and shipped them to Guam to boost our numbers. But we built a 26-foot replica of the Willis Tower in Chicago using 74,000 blocks. And so the records are breaking.
Wow.
And yeah, they're fading fast.
So we both of them out of the water at the diving center. And are you able to hotspot, Brandon? Yeah, I'm gonna jump over to Wi-Fi real quick. So jump over to a hotspot right quick.
Remind me to never ask a guest about bandwidth or internet connectivity again. Never, ever will I ask that question again, because it went right down the tubes the minute I asked that question. So we'll give him a second here, Troy, so we can get him back on for a couple more final comments here. I know that's
well, I really want people to know, because they really have done a lot out there, and it's funny to go with them to 2 meetings while we were out there, and get to meet people in the community and stuff like that. Guam police chief in Guam, and get the chance to meet with them just to hear about some of the work they did. So it looks like y'all are back with us.
Try it. Unmute and try it.
Yeah. Looks like we need a little sound here.
We get audio.
Now we've lost the audio. Yeah.
Of all things.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's do this. Let's roll the recorded segments. That's a good chance to do this here. So what we're going to do is go to Tony Rice and do the astronomy report. We'll do Jen's This Week in Tornado History, and we'll come back and see if we can get Landon and Brandon back on with us, and we'll do a weather roundup, picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Activity on the sun's surface is increasing, and this is expected as we progress through solar cycle 25, the approximately 11-year-long period where activity ebbs and flows. What isn't expected is the rate at which that activity is increasing, measured by counting sunspots. If you visit NOAA's Space Weather Prediction Center at swpc.noaa.gov, click on Products and Data, and then Solar Cycle Progress, You'll get an interactive visualization of the number of sunspots that are observed each month. You also see predicted rates and a confidence interval. Also notice that observations are far above those predictions, sometimes double. Sunspots are cooler areas on the sun's surface, still about 6,500 degrees Fahrenheit, but they're significant because they indicate blockages deeper within the sun's core that are preventing heat from making its way to the surface, at least in a straight line. That energy, it's going to make its way out, usually by going around the sunspot, and as that happens, the field lines of this magnetically charged energy twist and tangle, sometimes causing violent releases in the form of space weather, which can impact Earth. So is this a blown solar forecast? Maybe, but solar weather prediction is in its infancy, especially when compared to other forms of meteorology. This might be a particularly active solar cycle, which is interesting because the previous solar cycle, which ended in September 2020, marked the least active in a century of observations. Or maybe we got that September date wrong, perhaps by as much as 6 months. And this increased activity is just that expected upslope, shifted a little bit earlier. Either way, we'll get more of an answer in 2025, as that activity is expected to reach a solar maximum. The peak there is measurable not only by the number of sunspots, but also as we watch the sun's polarity flip. The North Pole will become the South Pole and vice versa, magnetically speaking, of course. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, a destructive tornado hit parts of El Dorado, Kansas, and Butler County on June the 10th, 1958. It was given a rating of F4, but Thomas Grzoulis in Significant Tornadoes notes that the tornado could have received an F5 rating, but it was hard to determine with the available photos and descriptions. Tragically, 15 people were killed and there were at least 50 injuries. The tornado began 7 miles to the west and northwest of El Dorado and moved to the east-southeast, passing through the southwestern part of the town. Grzoulis notes that a 45-block area was, quote, torn apart. Approximately 200 homes were destroyed. The Climatological Data National Summary entry on this event mentions the following occurring with this tornado. A government bond from El Dorado was found 60 miles to the southeast. 8 $100 bills were found intact in an envelope far from the owner's home in El Dorado. A boy was found with a dozen splintered sticks protruding from his chest. An automobile was carried more than a block and jammed through a roof where it lodged between a bed and a dresser. And a woman was pulled through a window blown 60 feet from the house, and beside her was a broken record entitled Stormy Weather. Read about this event and over 550 more at tornadotalk.com.
All right, welcome you back to WeatherBrains, and we have Landon and Brandon. I don't know, we've gotten 2 camera shots here, but just wanted to go back to this real quick. So y'all are, okay, people think, okay, Lincoln Logs. I can put a few of those together. I've been known to do that a couple of times in my past, as most of us have. But with Habitat for Humanity of Guam, y'all, this was not a little venture. And so let's kind of pick it up on where we left off.
Yeah. So can you hear me first?
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
Perfect. So I can hear you on Lena's computer. So this was a long time planning. We decided to get a lot of the grunt work and the brainstorming during the COVID years, and so probably a year in advance we had to come up with some ideas, looking at the construction styles. How can we build this thing? Is it going to be stable enough, especially for the height versus the footprint? And so Landon's got some notebooks where he had drawn out a lot of the layers and where we're kind of proportioning pieces off the way the Sears Willis Tower is. And so it took a lot of different working parts to figure out the charity, how to do the fundraiser. Landon's got a picture of the tower on the phone that's 26 feet tall. And so we put things into motion. We got them all on board. They were very eager to support. And so we just want to see what we could do. We had built a 18 foot tall tower in his house. He's got like one of those switchback stairways that just kind of goes up half and half. And so we built it on the steps, and we had to use ladders to get around it, to get up on the steps. we're using 5-gallon paint buckets to stand on top of the paint buckets stacked on top of each other to be able to get on top. We're almost leaning over the rails on top of the stairway precariously to get the top of the tower. But it was a positive proof of concept that we were able to do. And it actually did withstand several small earthquake tremors, and it was quite stable.
It was very stable, and we were very pleased with how it stood up. Right after we built that, though, one of our team members from Habitat for Humanity sent us a news article from Yahoo News that this organization in Utah had just broken a new record. And so once we saw this new record, it raised the record from 17,000 blocks to 37,000 blocks. And I started fishing for information from them as a Lincoln Log fan, but without revealing my plans or goals. And they told me that they were going to be setting another world record for the tallest tower. And so we knew that we had to beef our things up a little bit. So we ordered more blocks, went bigger, taller, stronger. And that's where we ended up with our tower. They were able to make both of their records before we broke it. And so we broke it a couple months later.
Yeah, we knew we wanted to not just go a few inches bigger, but we wanted to go big time bigger to make sure we clinched the record. And so we actually planned for a 6 or 7 day build. We had a surveyor, we had the Guam Territorial Band, a band that we used to play in all the time. We're still kind of inactive members of it, but they came and performed on the measuring night. And so we did not get the full tower the way we wanted, but we knew we had beat the standing record. So we got the official measurement. And then the next day we came in and built the rest of it. We just didn't know if it was going to be able to stand. So we wanted to get the certain measurement first, and then we would take another measurement the next day or two later. And so we went right up into the skylight of the center court atrium. We had publicized beforehand with the island media that the skylight was the goal, that we're going to break that plane. And sure enough, that's exactly what we did. And it counted for about 25.889 feet in height. So that should be a long-standing record. If somebody tries to beat it, I hope they do. So we can go.
Yeah,
bigger
but
bring it on.
also point out that you raised $20,000 for Habitat for Humanity of Guam. So
That's right. So it was just amazing to see how the community came in support of the efforts. I think we want to do like a sponsor of blocks. And so we had specially made blocks that were all the same dimensions, but they are just white blocks. And so as people donated a couple of dollars, whatever, to the Habitat for Humanity, they can write their names, put the families on it, put messages. And so seeing how that just took off, it took a few days to get into the Facebook world, but people started coming in droves, and it was just amazing. And so after that event, we had another one around Christmas. One of the other malls, the Micronesia Mall, invited us over, and so we had a big Christmas display set up. We did a miniature, 15-foot tall Empire State Building, another Willis Tower, and then we did the Singapore's Marina Bay Sands Hotel. That it looks like 3 big towers with a big ship on top of it. And so that's what we duplicated. We used a lot of blocks that would not be allowed for a Guinness record attempt, but we're beyond Guinness now. We're just having fun. We're inviting the community, adults, kids, whatever, come have fun. And so a lot of the adults have been enjoying it because they grew up with Lincoln Logs. So we are working on plans for another event in August, September, and we're going to just plan for a longer window of building just to get the community involved.
Landon, tell me a little bit about the foundation that you co-founded, you're president of, Suicide Prevention and Education Awareness, frankly, for Guam, and why that's so special to you.
Yeah, back in 2018, I had a close friend of mine about commit suicide by hanging, and that bothered me significantly. I was able to get out of the office where I was working that Sunday afternoon and made it over here close to the Hilton in under 6 minutes. And you know the distance from WFO Guam to the Hilton is not 6 minutes. I made it there just in time to prevent him from hanging. It was a tumultuous evening after that and period of time afterwards. Not even 2 weeks later, on New Year's Eve, I decided to drop by one of the cliff sites over by the Hilton Hotel just to look at the waves. and calling a surf observation to the office. And there was a woman sitting on the edge, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to bother her. I'm not going to say anything. And if she's depressed, I don't want to know anything about it because I'm too stressed. I want to focus on myself. But my instinct got the better of me. And as I was approaching her from behind, I said, "Good evening. How are you?" And she kind of jumped as she was startled. And she's like, "Oh, I didn't know you're behind me." And so, because you're walking up this jungle path, and then you come out to this clearing and then the ledge. And so her back was toward me. And so I was like, okay, let me figure out the situation. So I looked over the railing, and she was just dangling her feet off the side. And I said, "How are you?" And that was going to be my gauge. And she says, "Okay." And I knew then, I was like, damn it, she's depressed. And I knew I couldn't leave her at this point because something wasn't right. And so I just stood there and I said, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "No, don't worry about it." And so I'm like, okay, how do I proceed? So I kind of half jokingly said, "I wouldn't jump if I were you." She's like, "What?" I said, "I wouldn't jump if I were you." And she's like, "Why would you say that?" I said, "Well, if you ever wanted to have a thrill, if you wanted to jump to the water from this cliff, you're going to have to get a really good running start because chances are you're going to fall on the cliff, on the limestone, you're going to tumble down, you'll probably get on this little ledge, you have broken bones, you'll be in agony and pain, and it's going to take hours to get anybody to rescue you." I said, "Otherwise, if you make it all the way down to the water, because of the large waves, you're going to probably survive the fall, you're going to be thrashed around on the waves, you're going to be injured, and then you're going to be suffering before you ultimately drown." She's like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." And I'm like, ding, big clue. And I said, "What is going on?" I said, "Something's bothering you." And I said, "I'm not leaving until you open up." And the sun was starting to set at that point, and it started to rain. And I said, "I'm not leaving." She's like, she was silent for a while. Then her shoulders just slumped and she started crying, and she started opening up at that point, and something was significantly wrong. So I invited her to the Sheraton Hotel over here for coffee. And I said, "You like coffee?" And she's like, "Yeah." I said, "Let's go get coffee." And she would tell me that she had walked there, not planning to go back home. And she left her 4 kids, 12 and under, at the house alone. So I ended up dropping her back to her apartment, but she later found me on Facebook and sent me a message saying that she had no plan to ever go home again and to give her children a better life, to start out the new year without her. And I said, "How is that going to make it better?" And so it struck me hard at that point. I started asking questions. Like, we have so many organizations on this island focused on suicide awareness prevention, and Guam has some of the highest rates per capita of suicide of the United States. And the question is, why? We live in paradise. What is so bad that's causing people in large numbers to commit suicide? And so we started asking those questions. COVID happened, work happened, so we lost a lot of traction. But I had a lot of interest from the media, from at least one of our senators. And so in 2022, we got our act together and started a nonprofit, the Hagu Foundation, to engage the community in suicide awareness prevention and to work with behavioral health specialists and professionals to just get people talking. And so May 31st last year, we had the town hall meeting roundtable discussion with about, I think it was 40 some folks across the community, including the Lieutenant Governor of Guam, to talk about the needs, the problem areas, and how people can get involved in training and other awareness processes. So it's taken off. We've been doing several things with one of the local mayors to engage the community through activities-based engagement for emotional, mental health, well-being, and just to get people out of their homes to focus on activities that people can engage in and learn new talents and skills.
Yeah, thanks, guys. That's a great story. And mental health affects every single family. Every family. I don't care who you are. And if you say it doesn't, I've got a really good sermon on lying. So that's a great ministry. So thanks a lot, guys. And if you can hang with us for a few more minutes, we're going to do a quick email segment, and we're going to come back and do a weather roundup. We'll ask about current weather in Guam and where everybody else is located. We'll do a picks of the week. And then we'll wrap it up here. But let's see if by chance there's a little email to read tonight from Jen.
All right, so we have an email here from Gavin White, who is an undergrad studying atmospheric sciences at Ohio State and is interested in getting into the podcasting world with a weather show of his own, and just wanted to get some tips on that endeavor and maybe preparing for the Met field. So he's very interested in getting into something like that. So I thought I'd ask James here in a minute, but Tornado Talk started out as a podcast. And so my advice would be, don't bite off more than you can chew, because we made some great episodes and I love them. And I hope to continue to turn some of our new summaries into videos, but we were doing so many that we got burned out. And so don't burn yourself out, but I would jump into it and try it and just be yourself and to see what you can do. And I wanted to ask James, what do you think about podcasting? And I don't even know how WeatherBrains got started. How did that all get going?
Well, the deal is, what we do, it's very structured from early in the morning until late at night. And I think everybody, I don't care who you are, needs a creative outlet where you can be free to talk about what's on your mind. And, and podcasting was really new in 2006. And I just thought, well, let's try. I'm an early adopter. You know me, I'm an early adopter and everything. In fact, I just put the iOS 17 operating system on my phone here. It was released today. I mean, I'm an early adopter, so it was a good thing, and I love it, and I really don't care if anybody listens. I never have. Now we've got a lot of people that do listen, a lot of people that do watch. It's morphed into this, kind of important part of the weather enterprise here. But I think everybody should try it. Listen, it doesn't matter if 5 people listen or 10 people listen. It will give you a chance to learn how to communicate. It will learn to give you a chance how to express yourself. It will give you a chance to be creative. And you'll, maybe it's not for you. And if it's not for you, after 5, 10 episodes, move on to something else. But maybe it is. Because when I was a kid, Jen, we had, commercial radio. I worked in a radio station for 5 years, and that changed my life. And now there's no barrier to entry. Anybody can do a podcast. Basically is, what I was, it's the same type thing. So my advice, go for it. Go.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree. Our second email here is from Michelle W. I was reading your newsletter. Thank you for reading our newsletter. And you mentioned June 6, 1944. My late grandfather was 20 and on the big red one and landed on Omaha Beach on D-Day. I remember him telling me that if it wasn't for the weather forecast, it may have ended differently. That's why I highly regard meteorologists. You save lives. Thank you all for that. My grandfather survived that day, and I believe the weather forecast played a big part in it. Keep up the good work on the show, and thank you to every meteorologist who saves lives and protects property. Thank you so much, Michelle. Those emails mean the world to us. Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing, and thank you so much for your grandfather's service. Everybody, thank you for sending all your emails. We get your suggestions and questions and comments and all that kind of stuff. Please sign up for our newsletter too, like Michelle did. Every Thursday morning, we send that to your email box, and I try to put the archives on the website. I need to catch up on those as well. But there's a little link on the website. You can sign up for our newsletter and get that every week. Back to you, Span.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink, by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
So we're doing the show on Monday, the 5th of June. Let's go to Landon and Brandon. So how has the weather been after the passage of Mawar? It looks pretty good to us.
Yeah, it's been pretty good so far the last couple of days, but we did have a tropical disturbance, another one that sent a little bit of a panic through the community. So we are communicating that on Friday. This disturbance now sitting west of us in the Philippines Sea that was labeled Invest Area 98W by the Joint Typhoon Warning Center. They have just upgraded that to 03W. So that's our third tropical cyclone of 2023, likely the third of maybe 30 some more to come this year. It's going to be a very busy year. We are actually working on the collaborative typhoon seasonal outlook for the region. This is a collaborative effort that started in 2021 when I took over the WCM position. I'm hoping in maybe another year or two, this can be an official NOAA product by CPC, and then that takes a big stress off of me. But we will be releasing that typhoon seasonal outlook. It was originally planned for June 1st, but that has been postponed because of a typhoon. So maybe that's a bad omen for the year. I don't know. But I've been too busy to finish this outlook. So I'm going to have that released on June 29th with the seasonal outlook for everywhere from the Marshalls to Palau and the Guam and the CNMI. But the weather is not too bad out there today. We're going to see the winds probably collapse over the next several days as we get into a much lighter wind field, mix of showers and sun. But one thing I want to mention, this is peak dry season right now across Guam and the Mariana Islands. But since January 1st, we've had 66 inches of rainfall. That's normally 21 inches this time of year. So we're almost 4 feet above normal for rainfall. So we're not going to have a wildfire threat this year. So that's the good news. But yeah, we're way above rainfall normal. That was thanks in part.
What was the rainfall, Brandon and Landon, for that one day as the typhoon was passing at the Guam airport? Rainfall was what for one day?
I don't have the specific 24-hour amount, but for the 72-hour period, given it was a slow passage, we're looking at anywhere from 20 to 28 inches of rain for much of Guam.
Wow.
72-hour period, much of it between Wednesday noon and Thursday noon. So just incredible. We're actually getting some new data that I will be incorporating into our post-tropical cyclone report, our PSH GUM. And we're going to be putting some new observations and see how that changes the top 10. With that said, the National Weather Service is overhauling the way the PSH is, the post-storm reports, the look and the feel of it based on a lot of feedback from end users. So there's going to be a small little text that comes out of our AWIPs. It's going to say there is a new post-storm report, and click on these URLs for various links. And so there's going to be a couple of PDFs that kind of do the top 10 rainfall, top 10 strongest winds, top 10 lowest pressures, tornadoes. And then there's going to be another PDF that has impact narratives, county by county, or if you're in Guam, island by island. And then there's going to be a couple of Excel sheets, CSV files, that will have all the wind, pressure, rain, and tornado data. So this is a brand new thing. It has just gone live, and I guess we were the first issuance of that new format. So my hair is still cut short because I was pulling my hair out trying to figure out the process. But we got the bugs worked out, and it's a really nice process. And I know, Troy, you said you were having some issues with the URL. We had Joshua, one of our forecasters, who does a lot of good work with our webpage. And so there are a couple of directories that are all caps or mixed case sensitive. And so the PSH, the AWIPS text product, will be a mixed case. And so that should fix some of those URL issues.
Awesome. Well, real quick, let's go to Troy. What was your high today, Troy?
I think we were getting into the lower 90s. We got thunderstorms mid-afternoon, and I actually hung out at the Austin airport with operations this afternoon during those thunderstorms. So it was interesting to watch that process with lightning on the ramp and ramp operations stop, but not much in the way of rainfall. There were some 3 to 4 inch rainfall totals about 60 miles southeast of here this afternoon, and a couple of severe storms as well to our southeast. But looks like we're going into a drier weather pattern, and everyone, looks like we'll probably see our heat indices at or above 100 by Friday and the weekend. A much drier, more stable weather pattern, upper level high pressure becoming a little more dominant, more of the lid on the atmosphere by Thursday, Friday into the weekend. So summer is on the way.
All right. James Adelot, how you doing in Tulsa?
Really good. We had our hottest day of the year so far today, all the way up to 91. And it's only been the second time so far this year we've been at or above 90 degrees. But warmer temps are on the way. So the weather ball is turning red for us.
Red.
Yes. So long range, there's a pretty good signal in the national blend of models that will be in the mid 90s next week. And interestingly, without our central and western Oklahoma contingents in, looking at mesonet rain over the last 7 days, where the drought was the worst in northwest Oklahoma, we've seen a couple of rainfall spots in excess of 6 inches. So all we had to do was do a drought show, and I know they're over there in Guam going 6 in 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's a little drizzle.
Yes.
All right. So, Jen, you're in the land of Canadian smoke, I guess. Is that your big deal now?
It is, and we've moved into abnormally dry here in Ohio. So we are doing pretty good, and now it is really dry and crispy up here, and the temperatures are great, and it's a little milky out there with some of the smoke wafting in, but we cannot get any rain going. We had a storm come in the other day, and it came from the northeast to the southwest, and it stopped right before my house, and nothing at all. So yeah, it's that's just how it is right now. But I'm loving these temperatures, that's for sure.
Awesome. So let's go to picks of the week here, and we'll Landon and Brandon, we'll come to you toward the end to give you time to think about it. But this is something weather related. This can be a website, instruments, hardware, software. Mine quickly. I had a book event Saturday in Athens, Alabama, and a lady came to me and she said, "I might need your help." And she ran this Facebook page, documents and photos from April 27, 2011. And all these people that found these photos in their yard, Bibles, books, canceled checks, they posted it to this page that she created. And she was able to return almost 1,700 items back to the original owners. It became her full-time job. And after a year, she had to kind of get back to work and she shut it down. But she still has this big box of unclaimed photos that were found. And she said, "Would you take them and maybe try one more time?" And I said, "You bet." And it's almost, it is sacred cargo to me. And so I've got these documents and I'm going to start working on it in the next few weeks. But anyway, Dr. John Knox, a friend from the University of Georgia, did a research paper on this project. And it's really interesting. And that's my pick of the week. It's Dr. Knox and his research project on the documents found. The length, I think the longest distance was 219 miles. But anyway, that'll be my pick of the week. And we should mention also that Kim had to drop off. So let's go to Jen. Jen, give us a good pick of the week. Go.
This one courtesy of Okie J, who saved me today because I didn't have a pick. But this is an article about the RAF weatherman who helped save D-Day. So really interesting read about with the anniversary tomorrow.
Yep, absolutely. All right, James A., before we get Fox 23, action news, live, local, late breaking, Weather Authority. Give us a good pick. Go.
My pick is from a young man in St. George, Utah, who is, according to his Twitter profile, is 16 years old, but he snagged a screen cap chasing a tornado. And near as I can put it together is near Dryden, Texas, which is just east of Big Bend. And it is a very vivid cloud to ground lightning strike in front of a big tornado with kind of a big clearing slot rear flank downdraft behind it. So it's a spectacular screen cap. And so just wanted to give him a few props for that. He says he is definitely the biggest weather nerd, an aspiring meteorologist. So we wish him the best in all of his career as he is just getting started too. Great job, Brody.
Excellent. Yep. All right, Troy, give us something good.
Well, before I go over to my buddies here, just real quick and I did this a couple weeks ago, but I'll do it today. Keep in mind that we never really mentioned it, but here we are looking at Brandon and Landon, where it is coming up on, it's about 6 minutes till noon on Tuesday. So keep in mind, they're 15 hours ahead of us Central Time wise, CDT. And just the good job that the National Weather Service in Guam did. I'm talking about from the forecasters to the IT folks to the IT, the electronic technicians. By the way, my ATs in Guam, you kept that ASOS pretty much going the whole time at Guam Airport. There were a little time when it was down, but they kept that thing going on the airport grounds, and the WFO is on the airport grounds. But just an amazing job by all the forecasters out there, and I look forward to seeing everyone out there again in person real soon again.
All right, so Landon and Brandon, give us something really good. Go.
Yeah, I'm going to go over to Brandon for a webpage, but James A., your last name reminds me, I got a message on Facebook from a Nancy in New Mexico. During the storm, she had seen our name in some national news coverage with the typhoon, and it turns out we connected. She's our fifth cousin that we never knew we had. So this storm brought us together. The media coverage put us together. It was phenomenal. And so we're talking to her. But for the webpage, Brandon. Yeah, I'm looking at a weather page. We are so reliant on satellite imagery out here in the West Pacific. And so there's a couple of pages that I really like to highlight. Some of the stuff produced out of Sims, Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin.
This is the mimic TPW. So you're looking at multiple passes of microwave imagery from polar orbiting satellites, and then it's morphed with model data so that we're seeing a near real-time type of depiction of atmospheric water vapor. And looking at that moisture, the new version will be an advected layer. So now we're, instead of looking at the entire atmosphere of one panel, separating that into 4 panels and looking at different layers of the atmosphere. So think of, like, for the West Coast, those atmospheric rivers. That type of data will be amazingly useful for really looking at where that moisture is in the atmosphere, how it's moving, and kind of gives a good insight into the forecast. But a lot of the imagery, Himawari GOES imagery that they have housed on the SIMS web pages for the tropical spectrum, just incredibly useful. And so we live by it and we die by satellite imagery out here. And so for all the data that's available through those web pages, it is amazing to have.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, guys, thank y'all so much. Troy, thanks for setting this up. This was a great show. Just great.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Again, just exemplary work during the typhoon. We watched from a distance, and goodness, the work was just incredible. It's an example for all of us. So thanks to both of you. But I got to ask, though, with twins, who's the biggest knucklehead, Landon or Brandon?
It depends. It depends.
Y'all ever torment people at the office, like try to pull a switcheroo on them?
Once in a while, we confuse people, but there actually is another Brandon in our office. So there's 2 Brandons and a Landon, and there was one case, somebody from regional headquarters had emailed me. I go by William. My first name is in the email address, not Brandon. So he emailed me referencing Landon for a project that the other Brandon is working on. So we had that freeway confusion going on. It took a little bit of time to unravel, but we made sense of it.
That's awesome. Well, we got to wrap this one up. If you're new here, WeatherBrains is typically on the air every Monday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. We do stream it live on YouTube on the WeatherBrains YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/WeatherBrains. But we know that most of you listen. So thanks however you consume the show. One way or the other, the email address. It is email@weatherbrains.com. We'd love to hear from you. On behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless. Great show. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good. Great show.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Your main shot and your cutaway shot. That's awesome. You're doing good quality.
Yeah. To get a